Hey y'all, it's your girl Jada J. Now I have not mastered editing yet, so this will be my fourth time starting over. But we gonna move on. We gonna move on. All right. Bam. What? Okay. Yeah. Because bam, we got it in the bag. I just can't. I just channeled Kevin Hart. Can tell me that's not Kevin. He's hilarious. He's funny, but he does that. It's like that thing. He'll be like, bam. I said okay, but yeah, I saw her, so I didn't give her the money. But bam, like he just does that thing. Like, did y'all see? Who's that? Jay Parker at the VMAs, and he was imitating him, and he just kept doing that bam, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's Kevin. Anyway, so don't. It's not too bad, y'all. I was only about 10 minutes in. That is kind of bad, but I just started over because I couldn't do it. I was over it. All right, let's rock and roll. And my sister was on camera the third time, so she was like, "Could you please take that down? I'm over it." All right, what you do for your family? Don't get fired. You're not my family, so don't. You work for me. All right. Anyway, respect. So then, oh, how y'all doing tonight? Y'all good? Okay. All right. So we open up with Victor and Anna. Okay. So they in the car. Remember last week he told Dax, "I'm taking her. I'm over it," and he told Valerie the same thing. Like, I'm about to be up out this piece no matter what. So he taking Anna. So they in the car listening to the radio, or whatever. Well, trying to, because he turns on the radio, but every station is talking about the president and the affair. So he turns it off. So he starts asking her questions like, "Did you love him?" And she's like, "Come on, I don't want to talk about this." And he's like, "Come on, I'm driving you all this way. Could you please level with me?" So she goes, "No." He goes, "Oh, for real? Why'd you do it then?" Like, just trying to, slide in there. And so she's like, I guess I was flattered that the most powerful man of a free world wanted me, the poor girl from Alabama. So he's like, dang and stuff. He's like, "How did it start?" And then here she go again. "I don't want to talk about this," and whoop de whoop. And so he's like, like, come on, just let me know. And he's like, "You could trust me," because that he figured that was her thing. He was like, "I'm not gonna tell anybody." She's like, "How do I know that?" And he goes, "Because you could trust me. I'm a vault. Like, once you tell me, it's not gonna go nowhere." And she's like, "Yeah, well, the last person who told me I could trust him is why I ended up in this mess." And he goes, "Oh, so he told you that you could trust him," talking about the president. And so she's like, "Yeah, um, and that's why I'm here." And he's like, "Look." She goes, "Yeah," and he saw me as a confidant. And then here Victor's like, "A confidant for what?" And she's like, "I don't know, like he would just tell me things." He goes, "Things like what? Top secret things?" And she's like, "Come on, really?" And he's like, "Come on, I told you I'm a vault, like I'm not gonna tell nobody." So she's like, it all started. No, he goes, "You're gonna want somebody on your side when all this goes bad. Like real, it's already gone bad, but real bad. You want at least somebody that you really trust to know the story." And he goes, "Because you're in danger." She's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "People are kind of looking at you like, did you do something?" Because she's like, "I didn't do anything." That's immediately what she said. And he's like, "I know, but somebody should know your story." And she's like, "Wait a minute, but you just told me I shouldn't tell a single person." He's like, "Yeah, but I'm a vault. Like, you could tell me." So she goes, "It all started when I used to tell him the person's name. Like, when he would take, the president takes a photo, sometimes they look like, what's this person's name?" And so she was that person who would give him the name, and he would always, I guess, be like, "Speak up. And I can't hear you." So she would speak up, and then he would say, "Don't yell, just come closer." So then she was like, she would come closer, and by the 40th person, she goes, "I was whispering every name into his ear, and he would put his hand on the small of my back, and as time went on, he kept sliding his hand further and further down my behind." She just said, "Just slightly." That's what she said, just slightly. We're over it. All right. So then after a while, she was saying, he was even like, "Come on, get in the picture." She was like, "But what the camera didn't capture was him putting his hand on my behind and groping and touching me when the person is snapping the picture." And she goes, "Oh, he waited for a while, before he knew, like, to see if I was comfortable." She's saying he wanted to know how she was going to react to the touching before he made his move on her. I guess his for real move, because you can punch in your face trying to touch the small of my back. Okay, let's just be 100 about it. What's your hand doing there, buddy? You better move it or lose it. Okay, so she goes, "But I didn't resist it. I just didn't resist it." And then she goes, "He asked me to give a tour to a diplomat in the Oval Office." She goes, so I'm so like happy and everything and excited that the president wanted me to give a diplomat the tour of the Oval Office. She goes, I get down there and it's just me and the president. I'm trying to figure, okay, so she goes, I didn't leave or anything. I'd have got down there and been like, well, excuse me, with all due respect, Mr. President, I don't appreciate being lowered down here and, you convincing me that this is something that'll look good on my resume and I could use to get other jobs to further my career. And you got me down here and you trying to be nasty. First of all, no, Mr. President, I'm not interested. First of all right. Second of all, aren't you married with kids? You better go on, Mr. President, because I have no problem calling you in and reporting you. Oh, well, who do you think they're gonna believe? That's probably what he's gonna say. Oh, you don't be worried about that. So I'm like, don't worry about that. I'll have that covered. Now I would suggest to you, never doing this again, because it's not gonna be me who's over with. Oh, it's gonna be you. Okay. Should we? I'm not gonna say that because I don't even think I can say that on camera, you guys. I'm not Bill Clinton. Did you guys hear that? I didn't say it. That was like my twin came in for anyway. Yeah. So he lured her down there and there was nobody down there. Then she goes, next thing I knew, he was up and, trying to kiss me. No, she was like, he was kissing all over me and this, that, and all this. And so Victor immediately asked her, did he force himself on you? And she's like, no. And he's like, are you sure? She goes, no, I didn't resist it. He goes, but Anna, she goes, I wanted it. All right. I didn't resist. Okay. So then we switched to Bonnie. Now, remember, we got introduced to the drug lord last week. JB didn't get his stuff. So he shot the other dude, Horace. He shot him in the face and his blood splattered all over JB. The drug lord found out where Bonnie worked at because remember, JB gave up her name, but he ain't want to give up her location or nothing like that. But the drug lord, that's in true fashion for drug lords, he found out where she was at. So he came down to the diner, he blended in, not really making a scene or nothing. And he's like, oh, it's slow in here for you ladies tonight, And she's like, yeah. She goes, you want anything, sir? He's like, yeah, just let me get a coffee, please. So then the other lady, Miss, I think they said her name was Tavia, Miss Tavia, sister, she was like, I'm just gonna go because it's just slow in here. So she's like, can I go? And Bonnie's like, oh yeah, go ahead. And then she's like, do you want me to do anything for you? You know, I'm about to leave. She's like, oh no, actually, could you just go check on the kids? She goes, I will, girl. Then she goes, could you check on my mama? And Tavia turns around like, girl. And she's like, please. She goes, I can't. I want to, but I can't even open my windows on that side of the trailer because. And she's like, I know, like it's all right. So then Mac is coming up, so Tavia's like, oh, why don't you have Mac, go over there, and this, that's just the perfect person. She's like, girl, I still need you to go check on the kids. She goes, okay, I will. So Tavia's out of there. Mac is coming in, and so she's telling him, she goes, I appreciate how you protected me the other night, right? But I can't have you, like, don't ever pull a gun on nobody again, okay? And he's like, Bonnie, I'm not gonna let nobody hurt you ever. And she's like, I know you're not. And she grabs his hand. She goes, and I appreciate that. And I'll never let nobody hurt you either, but you can't be pulling guns on people. She goes, you understand me? And he's like, yeah, appreciated that. Because that's his aunt, but that's like his mom, because Shelby out there wild. And like I said, we're about to get a deep story on them. I could sense it. But come on, girl. So then the drug lord comes up and he taps him like on his back. He's like, oh, who's this kid? I would have thought that was weird. Like, okay. And then he goes, is this your son? She goes, yep, might as well be. Appreciated that. So she's like, all right, get to see your cousins. And by the way, when she puts the food on, because it was like a few cases, he goes, does she really need all this? I guess talking about, his grandmother. She's like, don't ask, just do it. But she actually got something for the kids too, because she's like, all right, get some of the food to your cousins. And so Mac leaves out. I don't know. I would have thought something. I mean, people are friendly. I get that. So I'm not saying she should have immediately been like, don't make me pull my gun on you, sir. But I'm saying, I don't know. I just thought it was kind of weird that you came up to me asking me if this was my son. I was kind of over it. And in the midst of the conversation, Mac asked her, she goes, is Brody back? And he's like, yeah. And he goes, where is he? And she's like, he's at house. I gotta bring him the car later on. All right. So it seems like this Mac likes Brody. How he spoke about him. He was like, oh, is Brody back? It was a really excited kind of thing. So then as the drug lord and Mac are leaving out, the sheriff comes in. And she's like, oh, hey, sheriff. And he's like, hey. And, it's just small talk in the beginning. And then he goes, did you see the news? And she goes, no, I don't watch TV. And he's like, did you hear about the president? And she's like, yeah, I heard about that on my phone. And he's like, oh, but you haven't heard, because he knew her reaction wasn't up to par with it. And she's like, what are you talking about? He was like, they're saying Annie. He was like, you better call Annie. And she's like, what's wrong with Annie? Like, she's panicking. And he's like, they're saying her and the president are having an affair. And she's like, what? She's like, no, like, that didn't happen. He's like, that's what they're saying. Like, you got to watch the news. And she's like, give me a second. So she steps back and she's calling Annie. She doesn't pick up the phone. And so she leaves a message and she goes, she'll call me back. Like, I wonder if Annie used to do that all the time. Like, she'd call her, but she doesn't pick up the phone. But Bonnie is so, like, understanding that she understands Annie was ashamed of where she came from. So she never was really like, I hate my sister because she don't want to talk to me. It was more like, I don't take it personally because she didn't want to be here and she's kind of embarrassed of her family. So, because how that was what I got, how she said it. She was like, she'll call me back. Like, because he was looking like she didn't pick up the phone. And she was like, she'll call me back. Like, don't worry about it. You know, she'll call me. So he's like, you don't seem worried at all. And she's like, oh, I'm not. I know my Annie, and she wouldn't do this. And yeah, I mean, I know it's all just a big misunderstanding. She'll call me back. We'll talk about it, and I'll get, everything that's going on. And he's like, are you sure you're okay? And she's like, yeah. She goes, so anyway, can I get you anything? And he's like, no, I just came here to check on you. She goes, I appreciate that. Thanks. Kind of like, get on out of here then, but nicely. And he's like, all right. And she's like, okay. And leaves. So then she goes back there and the news is on. So she's watching. She hears, Annie Bell Hayes and the president. And she like, dang, like, you know, my sister was having an affair with the president. That's how she looking right now. She gonna get the real story though, because it looks like Annie's gonna be arriving and happy next episode. All right. So then we switch back to Victor. Okay. So then he asked her. He was like, "How long was the affair?" And she goes, 2 years. He's like, "Dang, Annie." Like, I bought Hannah because. And she's like, I know. He's like, no, I'm not judging. He's like, why didn't you stop it? She's like, I tried, but you know, he was just so controlling. She goes, but especially when I found out he had a wife, and no, she goes, whenever I saw his wife and kids, especially when it stopped, he was so controlling. I was like a possession to him. He was having me. I was wondering how he knew so much about things in my life, and I found out he's having me followed. And Victor's like, dang, you think he was like too busy for that? She was like, he was, but he was just so controlling. He would just have me followed on this, that, and the third. And she was like, it was so suffocating. And Dax. Victor's like, I know, like trying to say he gets it because Dax is the same way, but not that intense, I'm sure, because there was something wrong with that man. All right, president or not. Okay. So she's telling him, like, look, I tried to end it. He was so controlling, it like he wasn't letting it happen. So then she's telling him, like, don't repeat this to anyone. No, he's telling her, he goes, you can't repeat this to anyone. And she's like, I know. He's like, no, I'm serious. And she's like, what are you talking about? He's like, everything that you just said is a motive for murder. And she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, I didn't do anything. He's like, tell me exactly what happened, with him. And so she's like, we were in the Oval Office, and then, he's on top of me. He grabbed his chest and then he collapsed. And he's like, so you're saying it was a heart attack? He goes, no, that's not possible. And like, they have the presidents have the best physicians, best everything. Nobody's gonna believe he had a heart attack. She goes, but I saw him grab his chest. He's like, no way, Anna. And he's like, wait a minute, what if somebody wanted him dead because they knew he was with you? And she's like, nah, it couldn't have been. He was like, come on, think about it. So they were both doing this thing where, don't tell nobody. So she did that. She was like, you can't tell anybody what I'm about to say right now. He was like, okay, like, I'm not. And so she's like, I like this little friendship that's forming between them, but what we find out later got me worried. Okay, it just, so Victor's like, yeah, I'm not gonna say nothing. So she's like, the first lady was not upset at all. And he's like, really? On TV she looked so sad. She's like, yeah, that was just acting. She goes, she came to my apartment and tore me apart when she knew it was him and I were having an affair. And he's like, do you really think she could have done this? And she's like, look, I don't know. And I'm not even trying to think about it. Like, she's like, I don't even want to know. I don't even want to talk about it, So then he goes, okay, let's not talk about it. And she goes, this doesn't leave this car. And he's saying the same thing. Okay. And he's like, are you sure you're going to be okay out here? And she's like, yeah, I'm worried about you. She's like, don't worry about it. She's like, this is Happy Alabama. There's nothing here. Nobody's going to come here looking for me. And he goes, okay, if you say so. I don't know. So then we switch to Brody. Now he's coming in to check on his father. Everybody saw the news, okay? He's coming in to check on his father. His father's asleep. Dr. Allen's asleep. And he hears Annie. Annie Bell Hayes. So he turns up the TV. He's like, what? And it's like, oh, she having an affair with the president. So he's looking disgusted and mad at the same time. He's like, what? So he leaves the room, and then he goes to his bedroom and he calls. He called her back because remember somebody called him. It was her, but they didn't leave a message, so he didn't think anything of it. Plus, his father almost just shot him, so he wasn't about to be like, "Oh, who called me?" So he calls back. He first of all, he calls her phone, and it says her mailbox is full because everybody's been trying to get to her after this. So then he calls back the number that called him. So the guy at the bar who let her use his phone, he picks up, and he's like, hello, and he's like, hi. He's like, who is this? He's like, this is Brody. And then, so he's like, I'm sorry, man, I don't know Brody. And he's like, did Annie Bell Hayes, like, use his phone? No, he goes, wait a minute, do you know a girl named Anna? And so he's like, yeah, like, I know her. And he's like, oh, dang, man, like, you ain't here, something like this. And so he's telling him, like, he was trying to get a story out of him, because Brody hung up on him at one point. Because then he was asking too many questions. But anyway, when they got on the phone, he's like, yeah, I let her use my phone. And he's like, well, how do you know her? Like, asking what's going on. He was like, man, everybody knows her. Like, she all over the news. He's like, okay, but how do you know her? And he's like, she came here, asked me to use my phone. Then he goes, so tell me. And then Brody hangs up the phone like, nah, dude, ain't no story here. I was over it. All right. Couldn't do it no more. Then we switched to Shelby. Shelby is in there getting high with Rick, we find out his name is. And she goes, I told you I'd get the money. And he's like, yeah, and they're just fired up, fired up. And she's like, I told you I'd get the money. And he's like, yeah, you came through. And then so she's like, he goes, I love you. She's like, you only say that because, I got the good stuff or whatever. And then he goes, how much did you get again? And she goes, 2,000. And he's like, tell me how you got it. She's like, come on, I told you already 3 times. And she goes, the scratch off. Yeah. She goes, he goes, where'd you buy it? She goes, Ali Alexandre. I'm like, okay, so then they laugh. He's like, that's why. He goes, it tickles my tongue. She goes, yeah, it tickles mine too. And then next thing you know, they're turning on the TV and she hears about her sister and she goes, wait a minute. And so she's listening and he's like, come on, give me some more. She's like, hold on, that's my sister. He goes, come on, I don't care about your sister. Give me. So she throws him the thing. She's like, here. And then she's listening. And then she's like, come on, give me the keys, because she gets dressed as soon as she hears the story. That's how I tell you, everybody heard it, okay? Everybody heard the news. Everybody. Except JB's on the outs because he didn't really care. So yeah, she gets his keys and she's out of there. And he tells her to bring back more, which she didn't. And we're over it. Okay, so then we switch to JB. He at the bar. He looking for Shelby. He asking around. So he goes up to the clerk, Tony, and he's asking him. He's like, yo, like, what the heck? Has she been in here? What's going on? He's like, did you hear about Annie? He's like, Tony, come on. Have you seen Shelby? He goes, yeah, she left here about an hour ago. And she goes, who? Was she with anybody? She goes, yeah, with Rick. They were just drinking and, that's what they do. So he's like, does she have any money? He's like, yeah, big wad of cash. And she's like, oh, snap. He's like, are you serious? Like, did she really have the money? And he's like, yeah, like. And then he's like, all right, where did they go? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, come on, man, where did they go? We're like, where does the dealer hang out? He's like, I don't know. He's like, Tony, you know everything. Come on, just tell me. I'm not gonna go to the law. They call it the law. And so he's like, yeah. Jasmine, what are you doing? Jasmine. What is anyway, so he's like, all right. Yeah, I'm not gonna go to the law. So then he goes, okay, fine. So he tells him, he goes, Silver Creek something. No, he's out in Silver Waterview. And then he goes, where? No, Silver Dame Lodge, okay? And he goes, where? Yeah, he says Westview, and then he goes, where? He goes, Silver Dame Lodge. Sorry, you guys. Okay. And then he goes, what is this about? What is this about, JB? Is this about Annie? And he's just out of there. He's like, come on. Is this about her? And so JB is out. And then he says something like that unpatriotic son of a, and then, So then we switch to Vic and Anna. They're in the car. And so he's like, where is this place? And she's like, we're almost there. And he goes, this is like out in the middle of nowhere, And she's like, why are you being so... She's like, I really appreciate this and stuff. He's like, yeah, it's fine. And she's like, why are you being so nice to me? He's like, we've all made mistakes. She's like, none as big as this one. And he goes, yeah, but we've all made mistakes and this that. So then she goes, what mistakes have you made? And he goes, way too many to name. And she's like, come on, just tell me something. And he goes, is this confession hour? And she's like, it can be, just give me some information. So she asked him, she's like, have you and Dax, stayed faithful throughout the whole relationship? And he was like, yeah. And she goes, really? He's like, yeah, since we've been committed, yeah, we've been, cool and everything like this. He was like, but when I was single, not so much. He was like, I was out there roaming around, messing with everything. Okay. And she goes, really? And he's like, why? He was like, it was just never any commitment. Like, they'd always go back to their lives and this, that. He was messing with married people. And so she was like, wow. Like, dang. And she was like, you did all that. Like, that's pretty, I'm glad you stopped because that's pretty dangerous. And he was like, not as dangerous when I was out there escorting. She said, what? He was like, yeah. And then he goes, this may not become as a surprise to you, but this is what I'm talking about, how their friendship will be affected. Because then, he's like, I like women. And he with Dax. So, I was like, Tyler, because I don't get what was the point of him. Nothing he said would have made us think, oh, well, that too. So I don't know. I feel like that was just thrown out there. And we need to be looking out for Victor and Anna now. But, okay, so she's like, really? And he's like, yeah. And he goes, I met this guy at a truck stop on my way. She was like, what was you doing at a truck stop? He's like, I was on my way to a photo shoot. I was working. And so she's like, okay, so he's like, yeah, so I met this dude. I stopped there. No. Yeah, he was like, I was at a truck stop, trying to get some gas. Something happened in the bathroom. Then the dude ain't want to pay him, beat him down. Okay. He met Dax in the hospital. He goes, that's where I met Dax, and he was the best thing that ever happened to me. He goes, sometimes. Okay, because, we know he a mess. All right, but I guess that's the best thing that ever happened to him. Just said the dude broke his head on the toilet, Then we switched back to Brody. All right. So he putting his hair in a bun because he was really whipping it. Just. I said, okay, Brody. All right. No, Brody he's cute, handsome. He ain't all that, but something to look at. Just we're over it. Anyway. So then he's looking at the news again. And he's hearing everything about the president and all this and Annie. So he calls up Bonnie, I guess just to kind of tell her. First he goes, have you heard? And so she immediately knows what he's talking about. And she's like, yeah, I heard. And he was like, have you talked to her? She's like, nah. And he goes, I called her. And she goes, oh, really? And he's like, well, did you get to talk to her? She's like, no, like I tried her, but it went like straight to voicemail. And then he goes, Bonnie, I only called her to check on her, right? And she's like, what are you talking about? Why are you telling me that? He was like, because I know you. She goes, what does that mean? He was like, I know you'll start to think that what we had only happened because she left, and that's not the case. So I just wanted to tell you that's the only reason I called her. He was like, I just wanted to tell you I was concerned. She was like, I know you are, and when she calls me back, I'll tell her to call you when I talk to her. And he was like, Bonnie, you're upset. And she's like, no, I'm not. What we had is done, and you can talk to whoever you want. So then they kind of changed the subject. He's like, okay, so when are you getting off work? She's like, I'm about to be done now. I'm just cleaning up, and I'll be over there. He's like, okay, Bonnie, be careful because it looks like rain. We know she's taking a motorcycle. So she's like, all right, I'll be there in like 30 minutes, and okay, bye. So they hang up the phone. So Bonnie is saying that it's over with. Brody ain't trying to hear it. Okay, because he's like, for what? For that, brother of mine? Like, really? I think it is her thing is like, that is my sister, and she just not, trying to do that to her sister. No matter if her sister, left or not. Which I would agree that I don't really think her and I don't know. I'm not even gonna say it. I'm over it. So Shelby comes in, high as a kite. And she goes, I need to talk to you, Bonnie. She was like, have you heard the news? Have you heard about Annie? She's like, yeah. And she goes, do you have her number? I want to call her. I want to talk to her. So she's like, nah, you ain't trying to talk to her. She's like, why? I just want to see if she's okay. She goes, you hate the. She goes, like, why? She goes, that's my sister. She goes, your sister that you hate. So she's like, I don't hate her. You know, she was like, yes, you do. She was like, why are you standing there smiling? And you just came here to glow. She's like, I'm not smiling. She's like, what's that on your face? She goes, you smiling. She goes, you know, she couldn't even stop the smile. So then she goes, all right, you're high. Get up out of here. So as she's walking her to the door, she was like, who drove? She was like, where's Rick? And, you know, she was like, oh, he's out there, you know, he's just out there. She goes, you drove here, didn't you? She's like, yeah. She's like, you ain't driving back. You're under the influence, and I'm calling the sheriff right now. She goes, you gonna let me get arrested? And calling her all types of B's and just, that's what you gonna do? That's what you gonna do to me? She's like, all right, fine. She was like, I'm gonna just be up out of here before the sheriff get here. So she tries to leave. So Bonnie is already on the phone with the sheriff, like, yep, she under the influence, trying to drive, and I'm not letting it happen. So then she's coming outside. Okay. So they get outside, and now they really going in on. She was like, so she finally gets the keys. So she was like, you just gonna let your sister get arrested? You just gonna let your sister get arrested? She was, what kind of sister are you? She goes, the kind that don't mess with my sister's boyfriend. She said, oh, well, you know that's not true. And Bonnie's like, what is that supposed to mean? What are you saying? She was like, oh, we all know about you and Brody and how you just couldn't wait to seduce him after Anna left. And you know how much older you are than him, and you're a cougar and this, that. So she smacks her. She goes, don't you touch me. Don't you do that. You don't touch me. And just she's high as a kite, and just, we're over her. She's delusional, and I'm over it. Not delusional, but there's something wrong with her. There's something wrong. Okay? That's what I'm saying. We're about to get a deep story on her and all of them, because I'm pretty sure they all went through something the same. All right? So then she was like, I saw you. Like, I caught you out there last night. You was with my boyfriend. That's what you do. She was like, you supposed to love me. You supposed to be my sister. You supposed to be loyal to me. That's what you do? She goes, you know what? You're not perfect, Bonnie. So, you know, stop with all this. She goes, I saw you at the shoes. You want to talk about seeing stuff? You want to talk about seeing stuff? Huh? She goes, come on, let's go. Let's talk about it. So they knew what each other was talking about, but again, they didn't say it. So Bonnie tries to give her a hug, and Shelby's like, no, get off me. Get up off me. You don't touch me. That's not what you do. So, I mean, then Shelby stumbles up out of there with the little Daisy Dukes and tank top she wearing. And she needs help. I'm not even mad at Bonnie. You know, some people always say, like, why do you keep helping them? That's her sister, so I get it. I can't imagine. I just think that's a lot. So then she's like, what you didn't, she was like, you didn't see it. You didn't see what happened. He took advantage of me and all this, talking about JV. She's like, why do you lie so much, honey? Just, why do you do that? She's like, okay, think I'm lying if you want to. Think I'm lying if you want. She goes, I know you. I know you're lying. You know, it's nothing. So she's like, all right, I'll just walk. She's like, I don't need you. I don't need anybody. And stumbles off. All right. So then we switch back to Victor. Hold on a second, y'all. Oh, yeah. And he's still talking to Anna. So he's like, you know, Dax rescued me from that lifestyle that I was in, because I was going nowhere but down. All right. But he goes, but, you know, like most people, he likes to try and control me, and I'm not going for that. So he goes, me taking you was mostly an act of rebelling against him. And I would have been like, because Valerie was getting on my nerve. He should have added that in. All right. Appreciate Valerie, but calm down, girl. All right. He goes, yep, so that's my story. He's like, now you know me, and all this information going to stay in the car. And she's like, oh, yeah, you know, of course. And she's like, you know, I know I don't, he's like, and thank you for, she goes, thanks, you know, for hearing me out and everything. He's like, well, thanks for hearing me, you know, pretending to care. She goes, I do care. He's like, yeah, right. She's like, no, I do. She's like, and that kindness that you showed me back there, she goes, I don't know what I would have done if you wasn't there to save me. He's like, I know what would have happened. You would have been trying to fight your way out of that crowd back there. And he goes, and one thing, just because now you know that I like men and women does not mean that you need to fall in love with me. And she goes, yeah, okay. He's like, I don't know why you laughing, because he goes, look at these pecs. And then she's like, Dax would kill me. He was like, yeah, he really would. He's a jealous guy. So, like, I don't know if that was Tyler kind of tying that end up, like, no, nothing is going to happen between them. Or was it kind of that, like, jinx it kind of thing. Like, because he said it, something is she might end up falling in love with him, or vice versa. I don't know. I can't really see him and Dax coming to an end. Because it looks like, you know how sometimes it's just like, y'all, you just trying to control me and I'm over it. I think Dax and him love each other. And especially with he was telling, you know, I met Dax at the hospital the night that guy bashed my head in the bathroom. And, you know, he saved my life and he's the best thing that ever happened to me. I don't see Dax and him ending it. Just, we need Dax to be like, I'm sorry for trying to embarrass you and undermine you and hurt your ego and your manhood. That's warrant for an apology, you know. So I think, I don't know, because Tyler's slick. Might even try to pull a three-way on us, like, oh, it's a man. No, we don't need that, Tyler. We don't need that. This ain't Love and Hip Hop. Anyway, so then we switch to JB. So he waiting outside of Rick's house. So he waiting up smoking something. And he sees Shelby stumbling her way in. So he gets out the car and after her. So she comes in and Rick is like passed out, you know, from the drugs. So she's like, come on. She's like, you used it all? She goes, I wanted some. And he's like, did you bring any more? She's like, I wanted some of that. So then JB busts in, immediately grabs her, chokes her up. And he's like, where's my load? Where's my load? She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. So he smacks her. He's like, come on, witch. Like, I know you would. This is the attention that you wanted. This is what you wanted. Where's my load? Then he pulls out some money out of her pocket. I guess she has some money left over. So he's like, oh yeah, you know, this your money right here. And he takes it and puts it in his pocket. Then I guess he said the amount or something because no, the load. He probably just assumed. I don't know. He was high as a kite, so I don't know about that, Tyler. But then Rick goes, I thought you told me you only got $2,000. He's like, you lied to me. He dang near wobbling too. So JB on the back of her hooked up, so he not even paying attention to Rick. So Rick come up with a lamp and hit the mess out of him in the back of his head. So she runs out. Rick is grabbing his pants and or shirt and running out behind her. So JB is knocked out. Okay. Then we switch back to Bonnie. She is leaving, right? Closing up, leaving. Doors are locked. She coming down the stairs. The drug lord shows up. He's like, oh, you know, I'm sorry to bother you. I know you're about to close up, but I actually left my phone in there, and I was wondering if you could let me go, if you would mind opening it up so I can go and look. And she's like, oh, yeah, you know, that's fine. That's fine. And so they're walking up. He's like, I know, you know, it's late, but my wife will kill me if she finds out I lost this phone. And she's like, oh, really? Well, she's like, I could relate to that. So they go in there. And she's like, okay, well, you sat over here, and she's looking. He's not even trying to look for it. So she all in the nooks and stuff with the seat and everything. And he's like, is it over there? And she's like, I don't know. Sometimes you got to dig in these seats. I know it's got to be in here somewhere. He's like, did you find it? She's like, oh, no, but I did find a knife. He's like, oh, be careful. You don't want to cut yourself. So then she looks on the other side. She's like, no, it's not over here. She's like, but maybe you want to try calling it? She's like, he goes, yeah, that's a good idea. He's putting on like these gloves and his voice is changing and everything. And she goes, okay, get my phone out of my purse and I'm gonna call. He goes, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So now he's got the gloves. So she's like, are you calling? She's like, well, I don't hear any vibrating or anything. Are you calling it? And he's like, yeah, I'm calling it. And then, so she gets up and so she looks, she's like, maybe you need to try and call in it again. So she sees him with the gloves on. She's like, what are you doing? And then so he just grabs her and starts choking her, like lifting her off the ground. I'm like, dang. And then we see next week, he lets her go, but he's telling her, you know, if that JB don't get that money, I'm coming for you and your family. And now he knows she got kids and stuff too. I can't, dude. I can't. And what they tease, Victor is gonna be. I think Victor's gonna be trying to attract attention because JB is like coming up the stairs, and then Victor's like, "Hey, baby," and then so JB turns and he said, "What the heck did you just say to me?" And it's a whole bunch of other dudes. Like he's like on the phone with somebody, and he puts the phone on. He's like, "Hey, baby," and then so then he's like, "What?" JB looked like he about to try and kill him, and then even the woman at the bar is telling him he need to get up out of there. Next week is going, and Ann is gonna be going in to see her mama because she doesn't even know that her mom can't walk. She's like, "What are you talking about? Why can't mama answer the door?" It's about to be good, y'all. This episode was very good. Not my best review. I'm sorry. I'm gonna come better next week. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure I didn't forget anything. So if I forgot anything, I'm sorry. Please leave it in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good night. It's your girl J to J. Peace.